What are the greatest threats to freedom that you see right now? I mean, you've touched on a few things right there, but I think for listeners who are not so familiar with some of these ideas and who are so far down the rabbit hole of, I don't know, whether it's, if you say smart city to the average person, right, that doesn't sort of raise any alarm bells. But when you're talking, or even talking about CBDCs, I would be surprised if the average person on the street even knows what CBDC means because most people are not in this world. So, can you explain what some of these things mean and what the actual legitimate threats to freedom are that people may not be aware of?
Sure, sure. So, we could point to this movement or this effort called the Great Reset. And so the World Economic Forum, which is this organization, like a think tank of oligarchs, media moguls, politicians, bankers, the financial technocrats, essentially, they're wanting to reshape life as we know it with an emphasis on food, energy, money, and they want to reshape life and society, business, and push forward what they call the fourth industrial revolution. And of course, Klaus Schwab, right? A lot of people have seen Klaus Schwab and the Great Reset. Not a lot of people on the street, I should say. And this is a big concern because what they're aiming to do essentially is leverage technology in order to better surveil and control people. And I'm trying to speak in terms of folks that are just regularly going about their business on the street.
Mhm.
But the one thing that I've come to recognize is unfortunately, there's a huge mass of people that are caught in what Napoleon Hill refers to as a hypnotic rhythm. They're drifting. This is all from this great book called Outwitting the Devil I've been reading recently. So you have the drifters and you have the driven, you have those that live in fear and those that have faith that everything's going to be okay. They can control their life. They have a definiteness of purpose. But a lot of folks are just caught in this hypnotic rhythm and they don't even have a desire to understand these things. But practically speaking, the threat of, and to go back, the Great Reset is where this smart city agenda is really being accelerated. Same thing with central bank digital currencies. And so the big threat, of course, is that people's behavior will be controlled. There'll be privileges that are threatened to be withdrawn. Uh, People will have penalties and punishments if they don't go along with this new agenda. Specifically speaking, we got a glimpse of it, of course, with what happened during COVID, where people were pressured to take this medical procedure. And if they didn't, they would have their livelihood taken from them. Potentially, they would be fired in certain instances. We also see this big old push for environmental controls. So environmentalism is another like attack vector. And I'm a big fan of being a permaculturalist and living in harmony with the planet. But unfortunately, through a lot of United Nations programs, World Economic Forum, they're using environmentalism as a ruse to implement this agenda. So another thing the World Economic Forum is pushing is this My Pass, where it's basically everyone has a personal carbon allowance. And once you exceed a certain level of carbon output for the month or the period or the quarter, then perhaps it's more expensive for you to purchase a plane ticket, or with this 15-minute city thing that's being rolled out in some cities, especially in the UK. And I think it was Oxford, I believe. You're not able to leave this certain part of your city unless you have a green light on the My Pass, right? That's where these things are going. So it's all about controlling behavior through surveillance, social credit scores like they have in China. And then, of course, the CBDC, the central bank digital currency. This will be an effort to make all money digital, which most money is digital now. But in addition to being digital, it'll be more easily surveilled. And then there'll be like this smart contract aspect to where perhaps if you go to the wrong protest, like we saw with the Canadian trucker movement, then your ability to do business will be limited or barred altogether. And then this will be, of course, coupled with this whole environmental carbon thing where you won't be able to purchase that plane ticket, or you won't be able to buy gasoline at the gas station outside of the city, or maybe there'll be electric vehicles by then. So it's just definitely moving away from freedom, away from autonomy, away from personal choice, and towards a whole lot of control, coercion, and social engineering of the public.
Mm. Now, obviously, you know that I'm very much on your side of this, but to play devil's advocate a bit here or to do a thought experiment, why do you think it is that these entities, whether this is the World Economic Forum or any of these other think tanks, nonprofits, whatever this sort of group of somewhat coordinated individuals and people are. Do you think that deep down their motives are intentionally malicious? Or do you think that they have a messed up worldview that just doesn't value freedom and they think that they're doing right by the environment and humanity with all these? What is your personal perception of that?
That's a great question. And, of course, we can use their own words, but, this is my theory or speculation as to what their motives would be. So a lot of things that take place that are more treacherous or conspiratorial, there's a lot of compartmentalization. And it was, what's his name? The gentleman that is the nephew of Sigmund Freud, and he wrote the book Propaganda, Public Relations. I can't recall his name at the moment, but this guy put forward this proposition that in order to control people, in order to influence people, we don't need to control everyone. We only need to capture those influential institutions in society, like academia, the intellectuals, the politicians, the media, for example. And then things will just kind of go top down from there. And so I believe for the most part, most of the technocrats, when I say technocrats, technocracy is like this form of governance that uses science and algorithms in order to make decisions for people. These technocrats, they think that they're doing what's best for humanity and civilization and the environment because that's what they've learned. And they don't question what they've learned. And of course, we saw this play out during COVID with the public health experts. Many of them are just doing what they were taught. Like the medical industry doesn't really learn a whole lot about nutrition, for example. And they think the best thing they could do to help their patients is to prescribe the latest prescription. So I think that's one piece. I do think that there is a smaller group that is more influential, that is most definitely acting in their own self-interest. And, to get a little more conspiratorial, perhaps there's a bit of a megalomaniacal angle to it. I
Mm.
do think that when you study history, the way that I see history is like a series and cycle of revolutions where there's one group in power and then another group topples the other group through war, through conquest. Now, of course, nowadays, I think the wars are going to be more financial, more socially engineered, where it's not going to have to be such a physical confrontation. But I think that there's a small group of people, families, powerful elite families that have realized we can end this cycle of revolutions if we really institute a social engineering campaign and we lock people down, we control people, and we make it basically impossible for people to revolt. And I think that's what's taken place in communist China, for example, where generations have passed now, where a lot of people don't question government. In fact, if you do question government, you're in for a world of hurt. So I think most of the people that are carrying out this quote unquote agenda are just, they think that they're doing their God's gift to humanity, but there are a smaller few that are kind of steering things for the purpose of maintaining their position of dominance over society.